Welcome back to Beholders Who Know on a D&D podcast. Today I'm here with Joel from Midlife Dices. Hi.
Hello.
We are going to talk about not one, but 5 PDF that you have created here that are meant to help with creating better roleplay and like stories from a very quick enhancement. But why don't you describe a little bit about the books that you've created?
Yeah, sure. So in the summer of 2020, I was playing a lot of D&D online and often 4 or 5 nights a week. And what I realized, especially because I was DMing for I think 4 groups at that point, that I would get a little bit tired by the end of every session. And then when I got tired, my narration started to get pretty boring and saying the same words over and over again. And I kind of thought I wanted to try and do something about that. And that was the beginning of the first form of what became Raconteur's Lexicon, where basically I just wrote a list of words for when you attack with a sword. And then I thought, but when you attack with the sword, that's different than if you attack with a club.
Right.
They're going to have different verbs associated with them, different adverbs too. And so it just kept on expanding. And here we are in March of 2021. And now there's 5 volumes of them.
Very nice.
And I don't know, it's over it's like 3,000 words or something. Yeah, just really trying to create word banks for DMs as well as players that they can reference easily to be able to, oh, someone's using a spell. How can I say, instead of conjure, what else could I say? Right? Just to add variety to the way we narrate and create better pictures in the minds of our players.
So I'm looking through book 1 at some of the options, and I can see the word that I would use every time, and I probably do.
And what would that be?
Well, so I play a monk on Fridays.
Okay.
And literally all I say is like, I'm gonna punch him.
There you go.
I do go into a little bit of detail when I explain it, like she runs up and she punches him.
And some just have such a great sound. See, I've been an elementary teacher for 20 years. And a lot of what I've done with kids is, helping them to increase their own vocabulary when they're writing and expand their ideas to come across those words that are more exciting and more visual. And that really is the key here. How do we make this visual? How do I, as a DM, make it so that the players see what I want them to see?
Right.
And you do that, it's as good of a word as punch is, and it's going to work in a lot of situations. Sometimes a word like thump might do the trick, or it might just give you a little bit of a different way to say the same thing.
Yeah, and it does add stuff instead of going, oh, I run up and punch him 4 times. If you add that little flourish of story, even though technically in the game you are just doing unarmed strikes with your fists. It's like, no, I use my legs too, and I use my whole body for all these flippy things and monk shit.
You can always say what action you are doing, in the technical term needed in the game. But as far as the narration that happens, go nuts, right? Expand on it. And a lot of times as a DM too, when my players get more creative in how they describe things, it's going to change the outcome and the flow of, let's say, the combat, because they've described it in a very particular way that causes the combat now to turn a different direction.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And it does add a lot to the story when people are describing. And as one of the things that I've fallen in love with more recently is I've put an emphasis in my newest game with roleplay. Like, I want you to roleplay. I need you to roleplay, because I had this like unfulfillment from like lack of roleplaying in the story, that I lost interest in the game a little bit, because nobody else was providing. So then I didn't want to provide as a DM to the story anymore, because I'm just like, well, if you're not going to even participate in this, what's the point? But I love that this is an option, because it's synonyms, it's options for other words, and sometimes some of these words are things you wouldn't even think of, at least not on the spot, but somebody could look
For
at this and be like, oh, okay, I know what word I'm going to use.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually early in the process, both my sons were helping with words as well. And they're both heavy duty readers, a lot of fantasy and science fiction, etc. So they were coming up with the words that I never would have thought of that word for
hmm
blank. And so it was just fun. It was tedious, but a really satisfying kind of tedium to go through and, go with your gut, come up with as many words as you can, and then go to, let's say, thesaurus.com and see what else is out there.
Yeah, and some of those words don't always work either.
Yeah, for sure. Like, not every word is going to work in every occasion, right? I mean, in unarmed fighting, one of the words is headbutt. You can't say, "Well, I'm going to punch him with a headbutt,"
Right.
right? All it's doing is providing you with words that act as, yeah, the movement for, if you imagine it as like a movie scene that you're watching. Think, well, yeah, why can't I, instead of punching, why can't I headbutt? That's still an unarmed strike. Sure, that sounds fun too.
There's actually, in one of the one shots that we did, we were all dying laughing, and I do not know why. Well, I know why, but because it was hilarious. But the player, I'm go, hey, you want to fight? And he's like, you want to do some fisticuffs? I would love to do some fisticuffs. And I'm just
There you
like,
go.
that's a word. And we just started dying, because with his accent character, it just fit so well. And I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, those, the words to me are the building blocks of the, like I said, thinking about it like a movie scene, like an action scene. Just last night I was playing with a group, and at one point they were kind of running for their lives through a
hmm
forest. And I couldn't help but picture it like, and I even described to them, the camera is panning slowly left, right. The trunks of the trees are whisking past as you are, avoiding branches and ducking under, etc., and jumping over things, etc. But the whole time as you're describing it, I'm seeing what I see in my head, and I'm just hoping that I'm conveying that to them,
hmm
to give them that same feeling of tension. That's what I was going for at that moment.
Yeah, I see that in book 2, you go into the magic side of things.
Hmm.
So spell casting and some conditions. So different ways to explain acid damage, instead of say, I do acid damage, but what happens after that happens. And some of these I think I've used before, like your weapon begins to dissolve after you hit the ooze with your rapier. And then they're like, wait, what do you mean it's starting to dissolve? I don't understand. What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, that this volume 2 is a bit of a tough one. I actually have an expanded version that I'm kind of waiting on a few things to put out,
hmm
that adds a whole ton to volume 2. Volume 2, grows, I think, 3 times as big in the expanded version.
Nice.
I've added things like colors, colors of spells. And I went
hmm
through the player handbook, and I read spell descriptions and just looked for what kinds of, do they even give colors, and every now and then they do, and sounds that spells can make.
hmm
So that'll all be in the expanded version that comes out. But the what's out at the moment, yeah, the a lot of like building blocks for, once again, like, how do you see what is going on?
Yeah. Adding in all the senses makes things like real. That's what brings people that's what brings me into the story. What do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? And stuff like that. But like, my favorite thing to do is to tweak a spell visually. Like, per the role, per the rules, it still does the same exact thing. But I want my Eldritch Blast to be purple.
Go for it.
Or the cleric wants their guardian angels to look like little skulls with wings, or like little angels in suits. Like, just cute little things like that that are personable to your character just makes the world of difference. And honestly, I even like sometimes, if there's a valid reason for it, for a spell to do a different type of damage, but it would be like, this is permanent. Like, this is a permanent change. So instead, like, let's say someone is gifted with the child of a thunder god, and the only spell they could take is firebolt. Well, maybe we change firebolt to like a thunderbolt of sorts instead, and instead of fire damage, it does thunder damage. But like, those are rare circumstances. It's not like, oh, I choose to do fire now, and now it's ice, and like, there's other spells that they could have used, but just for flavor.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about, let's say, the campaign Curse of Strahd, there's a part of the introduction that explains, for example, Mage Hand. If a spellcaster uses Mage Hand, it's now, skeletal. And so those kind of aesthetic changes, but functional changes like you're doing too. That's all part of the role play, and to me, the idea that like this story is for these characters to experience. In my Strahd campaign, at one point, the ranger made a secret pact with Strahd, unbeknownst to the rest of his group.
Oh no.
Made a pact with Strahd, and from that point on, he would always do this thing where when he would conjure up good berries, he holds out his palm and he puts his other palm over top, and these berries appear. And so after he made that pact with Strahd, I said, but these are not berries. And they were, the berries started to get rancid and kind of gross. The skin was wrinkling, and the juices, they were kind of drying up. And eventually, over the course of several sessions, it ended up being that instead of berries in his hand, he would have maggots in his hand, because he was being corrupted by this deal that he had made with Strahd. And then, of course, the players were just like, "Oh, gross! Oh, I don't want one of those." And yeah,
but technically, it does the same thing.
it did the same thing, and they're
it
like,
still works.
But the fun of it was they're like, "Okay, I'll eat. I'll put it in my mouth. Let's see what happens."
Honestly, if that happened in my game, I'd be like, I'd rather starve. I'll just walk.
Yeah, they're still there now. I think it's been like 3 months or 2 months, probably 8 sessions since I introduced that idea. And just now they'd be like, "Yeah, okay, knock him back. Let's go," kind of thing.
No, thank you. So then we get to the third book, which adds world building to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one was once again totally came out of the idea of like, when I'm tired, I don't know if I can come up with interesting ways to describe where they are, what's around you, etc. And when I showed it to a friend of mine, he said, this is also super good for people that are writing their own campaigns. Because, so if you want to go to, let's say, a forest, well, here's, a list of 25 or so words associated with being in a forest, so that you can actually skip the word forest.
Yeah.
And describe it in different ways.
I've written stuff before, and then I'm like, I read it back, and I'm like, I literally said forest 5 times in 3 sentences.
Yeah.
Nope. Let's switch this up.
This one, I think, this one is definitely more geared toward DMs,
Mm-hmm.
But maybe more specifically toward homebrew DMs, people that are wanting to write their own thing, because there's just a lot of examples in there about, weather and the terrain, and how would you describe water, and, traveling, as opposed to, you could say hiking or strolling. Those are two very different, actions, to hike and to stroll. Hiking has a feeling of effort, whereas stroll is relaxed.
Right.
So, as a DM, it's important which word you say. And to me, saying a word like walk is not quite enough.
Yeah, and it can include a sense of urgency as well.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
It's like if you're in a rush, if you're like you have to get there, instead of just saying I fast walk, it's like no, I'm pacing and I'm moving forward quickly. Like there's better
Yeah.
ways to say those things. Like, and I love using when like anxious the pacing, because that's something that actually happens.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're nervous. I start pacing around the room, waiting and fidgeting and moving around and trying to figure out what I need to do and looking out the window and like just like interacting with the environment.
Yeah. Like I said before, it's all about giving you lots of different tools, lots of different ways to say the same thing without having to say the same thing.
So you also have urban ones, which is cool because, and honestly, that could even be expanded further too, especially if you wanted to go into modern day type
Mhm.
urban or Eberron urban. Like there's a difference. Like we talking Eberron urban, we talking steampunk style urban, we talking modern day futuristic. So book 6 idea, I guess, but
Well, there's an expanded version of this one too, and
that works
this,
too.
I think I've added probably 3 times the amount of words to that section.
And like just even descriptors for like how it feels in a crowd,
Yes.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
I do like this though. This is really cool, and like even the inner tavern, it gives you an idea of like what could be in an inn. And most people like know, but then when you're like walking, you're like, what is the fuck is in an inn? Like it's an
Totally.
inn.
It's one of those things.
Ale's in an inn.
Yeah. It's basically a tool to prevent you from those brain farts where you're just like, oh yeah, what's here again? And you can quickly look over. Oh, the patrons are sitting on stools, and there's a fireplace for flickering,
Right.
right? As opposed to it's an inn.
Yeah, I like describing the overall view of things. So like recently or one time I had the players go to they found a house in the middle of the woods. So I said that they heard singing coming from deeper in the tree line, and they walk into the woods, and I'm like, okay, up ahead you see a beautiful shack that has grass vines and floral patterns all over the edges, and it's whitewashed with beautiful garden beds, and there's a big pot sitting on a fire pit in the center right in front of it. And it was just like what I did for that was I just Googled a picture of a cottage in the woods, and I was like describing the picture because it
Yeah.
just made it easier. But then I was able to, I didn't have to think about what does it actually look like. I had what it looked like and what I wanted it to do. I just had to add a little bit of tweaks.
Well, and the beauty of that is you were able to get the players to see what you saw in the picture. Right.
Yes.
And that's the crux of communication, that we want someone else to understand what we see or feel.
Yeah, nothing sucks more than having to repeat yourself.
Sure. And the other thing, though, I've realized you always have to be careful, because you might be describing something and you realize that you've kind of honed in on something unintended. And then
But
all of a
that's the
sudden, the
best
player's like,
thing.
"Oh, I'm gonna go look at the boba," and you're thinking, "Whoa, I didn't even plan for this. It's just kind of thing that's there."
So, do you watch Critical Role?
Yes, yes, and no. I'll say sometimes.
Okay.
I
So
have more than I do now.
that happened in one of the episodes, the earlier episodes, with a chair.
Nice.
And it was just a chair, but they're like, what did the chair do? What does it mean? What is the chair? And I'm just like, it's just a chair, guys. And like, it literally, like 30 or 40 episodes later, I don't know how many, but quite a few episodes later, they finally talked to somebody who was in the room, and they're like, no, seriously, what's with the chair? They're like, he just wanted a chair to sit on. Like, what are you talking about?
Nice. Yeah, I had it in a game I was playing where the characters were in a shop. And I knew what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to look under the counter
Mm-hmm.
for something. But I described some of the knickknacks up on the shelf. And they're like, I gotta go check out that candlestick. And the warlock, I better identify this candlestick.
It's like, it's a candlestick. 10 minutes later, you discover it's a candlestick.
10 minutes later, you light it, you put a candle in and you light it. There you go. But and then every now and then that actually kind of it's fun to go with their reaction where they're thinking, well, I'm gonna check this out, and then your brain just starts going. You think, well, what's something cool I could do with that?
Yeah, exactly. And that's always fun too, because sometimes your players will surprise you with what they want to do versus what you thought they would do.
Oh, all the time.
I mean, I'm trying to think of an example recently. I had one from my previous game that I DM'd where what they were supposed to do was they were supposed to attack the T-Rex. They were higher level for funsies because I thought it would be fun to fight a T-Rex. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, there's a T-Rex in the forest. Why not? I don't know. And it was just random encounter type thing. So I'm like, okay, cool, you get to fight a T-Rex and you can take it on with the two of you. No, they instead befriended it and then awakened it. So they had a smart T-Rex that was their friend.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I hate you guys so much. I love you and I hate you at the same time.
Yeah, lots of things that happened. A couple weeks ago, my Strahd group I thought they were going to be going to the castle for the first time. They're level 7, and they've avoided going to the castle. And so I had all the maps prepared, ready to go. And they're like, man, we think we're going to go here instead. And instead, they went to the opposite end of the map, doing something. So I'm furiously, as they're figuring this out, then I'm, creating maps and dropping in all this kind of stuff, getting ready for them. But yeah, that's part of the joy of the game is there's no set. There are linear aspects to it. There are definitely linear parts, but how you go about doing those things is totally up to you.
Yeah.
And the possibility of failure makes it so much more fun, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I've just started to learn how to do a sandbox-esque mode of game style. And it's sandbox in the way that I let the party decide what they want to do. And then I plan for that decision because I give them a job board type thing or a quest board. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to work on next? These are your options. And I randomly roll the options, or for the job board, it's like you can pick from these 6 categories for the town. Which category do you want to focus on? Okay, here are your options. And then I come up with a story. What happens through that is all randomly generated. I miscast a bunch of stuff in this, but I randomly pull a card to see if an enemy appears or not, or if the day they're fine. If they travel for 10 days, you get a joker, a deadly encounter happens. If you get a club, a normal encounter happens. You get a diamond, nothing happens. You're fine. That day was great. And just like little things like that. And then if they get a prize or an award, it's a reward for killing something. It's like something off of the creature. It's not, you found a bag of gold on the wolf somehow.
Yeah, exactly. That's fun. I like that. I like the playing card idea.
Yeah, that was from Savage Worlds.
Okay.
So they used that method. They technically had, it was like, I think it was fight, nothing, item, stranger for each of the suits.
Okay.
But I didn't want to come up with an NPC, which actually kind of ties into your fourth book.
Whoa, good segue.
Getting better at those.
Yeah.
Which is creating NPCs.
Yeah. Creating NPCs. You know, the thing with this one is, I know there are lots of NPC generators out there. They're websites that you can go to, click a button, and boom, you got an NPC.
There is a website you can click a button and have a character too. Doesn't mean it's good, but you can have a character.
Right. Yeah, and you know, those things are awesome, and I've used them too, right? There's one that I wish I could remember the name, where they have like a generator of taverns
Mm-hmm.
or shops and stuff like that.
Oh, I love those ones, yeah.
Yeah, which is super handy because when your characters say, "Oh, I'm going to talk to this," or "I need to go to a shop," and you're like, "Oh, I don't have anything ready for that," then boom, you're able to come up with it. But for volume 4, the NPC generator, it really was. I've always liked making my own thing, so I looked at the options in the Dungeon Master Guide, and they're fairly sparse. And I just kind of went with those and expanded them
Mm-hmm.
so that, you know, instead of 20 different personality things, now there's, I don't know, I think 100 or somewhere around there. Some of the things I left out of there, like alignment or race or gender, because really a lot of times that's going to be up to the story. You know, if you're in a place where there's going to be an evil character, then you as a DM would probably know that ahead of time. So I didn't put that in there, but you know, in a revision, I might add that back in.
Mm-hmm.
But what I once again with this one, I tried to continue the idea of the lexicon. And so, you know, with the personality traits and other parts too, when I say, you know, they're stubborn, well, I give you other words for stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't always have to rely on the word stubborn. So, you know, it could be headstrong, obstinate, or tenacious. And once again, the idea of like we're using diverse words, a variety of words to describe things. That way, you know, on your third or fourth time meeting that NPC, you're not like, you know, hearing the word stubborn for the 30th time.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like this. I love my weakness is random table generators, honestly. Like, I love random tables. It helps me get through my games as a DM, and it just makes my life happy.
Yeah, I had a fun experience with one of my groups where we were playing Dragon of Icespire Peak,
Mm-hmm.
and I added an encounter in there to make one of the missions have a little more urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had basically the idea of the encounter was that because this dragon has moved in on the mountain, that creatures that were inhabiting in the mountain have all moved down the mountain, and at the base of the mountain is this town. So what I had the characters woke up to this large kerfuffle, lots of sound and screaming, etc. And they got to this one area. There was a hill giant fighting a manticore
Mm-hmm.
because they had, you know, they were territorial. They were out to get each other because this dragon had taken over, and they were destroying part of the village. And while the characters were fighting, I thought, well, I'm not going to have all the NPCs be helpless people. You know, some of them are going to are going to get out there and fight too. So while they were figuring things out, I quickly rolled up a character, and she ended up being a young girl, and she was brave and curious and interested in drinking. That's what I rolled.
Suddenly that young girl becomes at least 18. No.
Yeah. And so what was funny is, as ridiculous as it was that it was a young girl interested in drinking, the bard, of course, a bard in our group, he's always motivated by wine,
Mm-hmm.
we could say. And so she could see he always had a bottle of wine. And so she kind of was latching on to him a little bit, almost as like a mentor mentee kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also kind of, she's curious. And so I put to use my 20 years of teaching 10-year-old kids and just bombarded the group with 10-year-old questions.
What would be interesting for the interested in drinking, it could just be like, she's interested in drinking milk. That's what she wants.
Sure, yeah. It could be that the water in her town is not good, and so really just wants some clean water.
Yeah, so you can make it.
It's not that she is drinking.
Yeah,
She's just always asking questions about it.
she's intrigued by it.
Sure, exactly.
Gotcha.
But the idea of her being courageous and bold, at one point the party, they were supposed to go to this place, this dungeon called Axholm, to clear it out so that the residents of Phandalin could go there in case of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
But the party wanted to rest. And this character, this girl being bold and courageous, she was like, no, we need to do this now. And so she went ahead of them and ended up being that she ended up, when they finally got there, they found her footsteps and they found that she had killed a couple things along the way, kind of thing. But then she was stopped by the boss of the dungeon.
Right.
They had to work together. But her and the cleric butt heads a little bit. And so she accidentally hit him with her sling.
Accidentally.
Yeah.
There was some quotes around that, guys.
Air quotes. Yeah.
Air quotes. So you said that you wanted to make a random NPC.
Yeah, we could. I did this a lot of times over the summer with my two sons, and we were always a little bit amazed by it. Even when you come across things that are opposites, that we could still kind of make them work, which was interesting to go through. So it starts by focusing on the physical appearance.
Yeah.
And like I said, gender and alignment and race are not included in this, although they're mentioned in the Dungeon Master Guide. I tried not to copy too much of that because I figured people are going to have that already.
I do actually. What's funny is I found a while ago, and I do not know where I found it. I don't know how I found it, but I found just a document that has a random race roll table, and you can just randomly roll. And I do it for my NPCs all the time because I'm like, you see a Goliath, and they're like, if I don't know what kind of, I don't want them all to be human or all elves or all whatever. This will give me that option. And I think I want to, this doesn't have all the new races. So I think I want to like remake it for myself, at least in like a Google sheet somewhere where it has the sub races too, because this one does have that. So if you roll dwarf, you would then roll to see if you got hill or mountain dwarf.
Right.
But now there's also the Dorogar, and there's the other races that exist. I don't know if there's other. I think there's more. Is there more than just that? I mean, there's the dragon mark dwarves that you can have.
Right.
So
yeah, I can't remember.
And then with the elves, this one only has 3 versions, but now there's the Eladrin, and there's the Shatterkai, and there's the Drowwood and High Elf, obviously. But like, there's so many more. There's the water one too that I can't remember the name of. There's just so many more versions, so I want to build a more updated version of this.
Yeah, that would be I mean, definitely for experienced DMs, that would be very helpful.
I just like it because I don't have to think.
Yeah, totally. And I think I left it out probably for that reason, the idea that will, let's say, an inexperienced DM know the difference between a mountain and a hill dwarf? And so, yeah, but could always make a revision.
All right. So far, rolling on this table, I got an average muscular adult.
Okay, an average height muscular adult
with long hair.
Okay. Is the hair braided, curly, flowing, or straight?
Flowing.
You can just decide. You don't have to
Nope,
roll.
I rolled for it.
Oh, did you? Okay, nice.
It's flowing.
Okay. Oh, flowing. Flowing, muscular, long hair. Okay.
And it's going to be a female, so I'm skipping the facial hair section. So
Sure. Yeah.
you could
Unless
technically
it's
be a female
dwarf,
with facial
right?
hair.
Huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so distinct features. Long fingernails.
Oh, okay. I like the juxtaposition of the flowing long hair, muscular. Like, so the long fingernails and flowing long hair makes me think of like a hag, but then muscular. Hags often aren't muscular, are they?
I mean, they're strong.
I guess, yeah.
Hags are very strong. So I'm actually, see, a hag to me is elderly.
Right. Yeah.
So even though they can appear younger, but usually
Sure.
like their appearance once it's removed is elderly.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like prissy nail long, like not like
Nice.
dirty,
Okay.
gross nail, but like prepared properly,
Well
getting your
kept.
nails done every 2 weeks at the nail salon that doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, using a whetstone to sharpen their nails, maybe.
Yes, exactly. So for the next section, personality, I do not have my D4 on me, so it's roll
Okay,
D4.
I can roll that one. So go ahead and look on table 2.
Cool.
D20.
She is aggressive,
Oh.
which I can see. I'm honestly seeing a Karen right now.
Nice.
minus the haircut, I'm seeing a Karen.
The Karen of the Forgotten Realms?
Okay. Or I'm seeing one of those like rich, snooty, preppy girls right now.
Yeah.
But that's just muscular, like she likes to work out.
Sure.
All right. Quirks and flaws.
We need to do interests.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So table 1.
Interests and physical fitness.
Well, that works out.
That's very, very fitting.
And so, yeah, with that, I like the idea of adding in things that would, let's say, distinguish them from a typical commoner, right? Commoner has, stats of 10 across the board.
Yeah.
So with physical fitness, then they get a +1 to athletic.
Right. And then with aggressive, it was +2 to intimidation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really fun because, like you said, commoners are just 10s across the board, and that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it makes sense on paper, but for a story, you're going to have a shopkeeper is going to be a little bit more charismatic than your average farmer.
You're sure. Yeah. And if the players get invested in in the NPC, like if that NPC somehow gets taken along for the ride, you as a DM want to have more meat on the bones, so to speak.
Yeah. So quirks and flaws.
Quirks and flaws. Okay, so go ahead and roll from table 3.
Shunned by their family.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Maybe that's why she's so aggressive. She lost daddy's money.
Yeah, she doesn't have money to go to the nail salon anymore.
It's like, that's why my nails are so long. I can't go to the salon anymore to get them cut.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's just a lot of hurt inside,
Deep down,
that she's dealing with, and the characters need to help her out.
So for her talents, she got community organizer.
Interesting.
Which could make sense if I'm going with like the preppy person, because Those are the ones that are always like, I need to control how everything goes. Let's make a party. Let's make prom.
Sure.
Let's plan prom.
Yeah, I mean, aggressive it's not that far away from being assertive.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a spectrum there with those two words. And so a community organizer is often an assertive person, but you can
Yes.
definitely see how an aggressive person could fit in that.
Yes, exactly. And it could even just be like aggressive and like I need to speak to your manager. Do I need to talk to somebody higher up than you?
Right.
Like that's intimidation. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, it's fine. It's okay. We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. So I did roll for bonds, and it's searching for a sibling.
Oh, well, yeah. So that works with the being shunned by her family.
Yep.
Those two work together.
And then conversation.
Yeah, so then the bottom of it was two charts, conversation and then expressions and moods. And these are more like the, volume 1 and 2 and 3. Basically, here's, 70, 80 words for words that you use in conversation. So that you can avoid using the word say 20 times in
Right.
this encounter, in this conversation. And a lot of these it will change how that dialogue happens, right? If I say that someone is mumbling, that right away gives a bit of a different feel to the conversation than if they were screaming, right?
Yeah. Or boasting or talking loudly.
Right, exactly. So, once again, the idea of like giving tools that might change the course of how things go. And the expressions and moods really came about because I thought, we have to remember that these NPCs have a life outside of the adventurers. They were already doing something before the adventurers saw them, and they will do something after the adventurers leave. So, along with that, I was trying to think of like, so what are different ways to say that you're standing somewhere? But it really turned into this idea of like, what is their face communicating to you, right? Do they seem, as you approach them, do they seem puzzled? Or do they seem upset about something? Are they appalled by what they're seeing? So basically, trying to really put a personality on the face of the NPC that might lead to a different kind of conversation than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, and I like that personality technically isn't in here too much. Like aggressive, yes, is, but you can, like you said, you can make that go whichever way you want. And this
Sure.
could be 14,000 different characters on its own with its own description. And there are like, for me, when an NPC has a personality and has something that you can remember them by, that's when they become part of the story and almost part of your family. Like, I'm a sucker for NPCs. In all of my games, I am a sucker for NPCs. They become, like, the ones I care about the most. Like, the kids that we've rescued that were orphaned, or the old lady who sold you the sweet cakes, or the two men who live next door who are married that are an air ganassi or a water ganassi and a fire ganassi from Dragon Heist that you just become really good friends with because in the winter the water ganassi is always cold and sick, so you bring him tea to help him stay warm. And it's just like cute little things like that I freaking love. But then you have the opposite where you're like those NPCs that you hate and you're just like, this guy again, why?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times, just like when you're watching a movie or a TV show and you have a feeling of like, oh, I can't stand that character. And I always think, well, then the writers they did a good job because you're supposed
Right.
to not like that character.
That's kind of like I don't really watch correction. I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but my husband did.
Okay.
So he told me about like everything that happened.
Yeah.
And I know that the actor who played Joffrey got a lot of crap in real life
Totally.
because Joffrey was a terrible human being in the books and in the show.
Yeah.
He portrayed that really fucking well.
Totally. They picked the right guy and he did a really good job of it. It was like a visceral dislike for this character. Just seeing his face, even, in a meme now, seeing his face,
Mm-hmm.
I still get the same reaction.
And it's just like, those types of characters are like, you love to hate them. But I don't think anybody should have hated the actor for doing his job well. And
Yeah,
if anything, it should have been like, holy crap, you did your job really well. I really hate that character, but like separate the character from the actor, which some people have a hard time doing, evidently.
Mm-hmm.
So your newest book that just came out this month,
Mm-hmm.
Critical Fails.
Critical fails. Yeah, so early on in my DMing, I grabbed a few critical fail charts wherever I could. And I'd use like when my characters roll that dreaded nat one. And so over time I've been playing, I was just reading this week or last week about lingering injuries. There's nothing in there like you lose your hand or something like that.
So these are just minor things that are inconvenient.
Yeah, there are consequences for getting than that one, and some are worse than others. In fact, if you roll, I think it's a 90 and above, good things. It's kind of like that moment of redemption where you thought everything was going bad, but you end up actually turning it around. So there's a chart for melee and ranged attacks, and then there's a chart for spells.
Mm-hmm.
They do share some things in common, but a spellcaster, you're not going to say weapon breaks when you cast a spell. And so it was just trying to come up with ways to differentiate the two. And then the rest of it really was, this was the biggest challenge I ever had, was going through saving throws and skill check and imagining, well, how, if let's say you roll a nat one on a stealth. Now, for an inexperienced DM, you might just leave it at that. You're not stealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought, but I want to, once again, give tools to someone who might not be able to think on their toes, get that stuff figured out that fast. They can just look at this and this is what happens instead. So, if you roll a 1 on your stealth, one of the ones I have in there is that you sneeze and it attracts hostile creatures in the area because they hear someone sneezing.
I like to, with the climbing, you have like you lose your handhold or your foothold and you claw wildly at the air. I like to add like make a dex save. There is a chance that maybe, just maybe, they can grab back onto that rope really quickly, but then you're risking like, okay, if you grab the rope, you are still going to take a little bit of damage because you're like pulling really fast.
Yeah.
And your hands are going to get burnt if you don't have gloves on, at least. I like adding that kind of stuff to it because it makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and so I do have in the combat charts, I have a lot of opportunities for saving throws, dex saves, and constitution saves, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
to help you avoid those bigger consequences. And to be honest, I had thought about doing what you just suggested, but I ran out of room.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it might be the kind of thing that once I get enough other stuff, then I can expand it a page and throw that kind of thing in there. Because yeah, I agree. These aren't necessarily. This is totally a. Here's ideas for you. Do with this what you will, kind of thing.
Yeah, and even if you just look at this and read it over and you're like, oh, okay, that's what I can do, and that gives you other ideas to actually use. That it sparks your brain into thinking of some things that could happen, and then that might bring more ideas to your head. They're like, oh well, if that's an option, then I can do this.
Yeah, and that that really was my goal. Like, I just want to give people ideas that they can draw from and make it then their own.
I had a game that I was playing once, and it was a reaction type thing to a fail. I was already severely injured, or partially injured, I should say, probably like half health. And we were trying to get out of a building last minute, and I was told to freeze. And I was like, I looked around and I'm like, okay, maybe I can make it. So I tried to dart, like just get out of there as quickly as possible. And I forget what I had to roll, but it didn't roll well enough. And the person was holding a cone of cold.
Okay.
So I was encapsulated in the ice, and I died in the ice because I was frozen. And as they were talking, I was rolling death saves.
Right.
Because they didn't know I was dead.
Yeah.
Or unconscious. So I ended up dying in the ice statue of myself.
Oh, wow.
Like, why?
That's a brutal way to go.
Right?
Yeah.
I ended up coming back because they made a deal with a cleric to resurrect me, that we would become clerics of their gods for 6 months.
Okay.
So I had to take a level in cleric as a ranger, which I did not want to do, but I was like, okay, I guess I'm a cleric now.
Yeah, funny. Yeah, I had it where the group that I was playing with, Icespire Peak, they were in the place Axholm, in that dungeon there. They were clearing out.
Mm-hmm.
And they had gotten up to the area and they could hear, this ghostly sound come from around the corner down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
And two of the adventurers went into a room. Two of them were in the hallway, and the cleric said, I'm going to peek around the corner, see and find out what I see. I'm like, well, okay, so describe how you're doing this. And he said, well, I'm going really carefully. I said, okay, roll stealth. And he rolled a 1.
Ouch.
So I'm like, well, as you try and hug the stone wall, your metal shield clangs up against the stone, and this enormous scraping sound
Mm-hmm.
echoes down the hallways, etc. And they're all just laughing, oh, ha, ha. But the creature that they have to fight in that encounter there is a banshee. So they think they just kind of got away with making a big noise, and I say,
nope.
And then the banshee appeared right in front of his face. And banshees have, what is it called? Something whale power.
Yeah.
Where if you're within 15 or 30 feet, they knock you down to 0 hit points if you fail a saving throw. And 2 of the guys failed that saving throw. And so that nat 1 turned into a very intense battle for their life at that moment.
Right.
Where the 2 other guys were in a room. They could hear the banshees screaming. They heard, the sound of the armor against the wall, etc. They didn't really know what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
but they knew that people were in trouble. And so instead of them trying to go in very carefully, it ended up just being total chaos.
As it will be.
Yeah, it was that was a super fun encounter.
Yeah. Have you seen, I'm sure you have, but have you seen the decks of crit fails and crit successes?
I don't know if I have.
So I don't think they're official content or anything, but if you Google critical fail D&D or something like that, and critical success, there is a deck of cards, and you literally draw a random card. And if it's natural 1, you draw the random 1 from the crit fail. And there's a melee, there's a magic, and then there's a ranged option.
Okay.
So I remember that we played with this one time in one game that was meant to be a very difficult game. So these cards are bullshit hard. They're evil cards. So my character rolled a natural 1, and we pulled from the deck, and the answer was I lost a limb. It got bitten off by the creature I was fighting.
Oh!
And so we rolled a d4 to see what limb it was.
Ah!
And it was just what? Are you serious? I lost a limb? Really? But like the 20 ones were also really cool, and you did something really cool against the monster. So there's like it was an even balance. But I was just like, what am I gonna do without a limb?
Yeah.
Could it be my left arm? It's like, you don't have a choice. Roll a d4.
Well, and that's the lingering injuries section that I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
It's lose a limb, lose an eye. There's some brutal things. You think about, let's say, a paladin or a cleric that, shield in one hand, weapon in the other. Well, you're going to be down one of those two things. Those are both pretty important things for that class.
Well, the good news is there's a lot of stuff now that you can also do to counteract those things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, lots of spells or an NPC somewhere in the area.
Officially, there are prosthetics now for
Right.
limbs, and I'm pretty sure there's like a magical eye, or you can like get a tattoo that lets you see even if you can't see. Like, so there's a lot of ways to counteract it, but there's also ways that you can just work with it and go with it and just be like, this is my life now. Okay,
Yeah.
let's go with it.
Yeah. I live in a wheelchair. And so when that combat wheelchair
Yeah, that was really cool.
came out, I was like, oh, that's super wild. Yeah. And just recently, I was playing a game. I can't remember what video game it was. And I just was thinking, like, why wouldn't they have like a wheelchair as an option here? I don't really understand why you wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's awesome that that kind of thing is becoming more prevalent and hopefully more kind of normal
Yeah.
in terms of developers thinking of these things ahead of time
Mm-hmm.
and having it all there in place.
Yeah, there's been a couple of games that I've seen that might not have wheelchairs, like it's not like a stat ability because they don't do things with that type of they don't do any type of stat ability, but they have like a picture of a person in a wheelchair on the cover and they're like talking to their friends like it's just normal, which is how it would be.
Yeah.
And it's like that was Mall Kids, I think, was like that one. I remember I played in Shadowrun and I rolled really, really bad for my strength. Like my strength was super low. And then I got a negative that made my strength even lower.
Oh.
So we went with this was a home game. We decided that what made logical sense with that low, like we're talking like 3-4 on a D&D scale low. What made sense was that perhaps she had something that required her to be in a wheelchair, and she was a decker, so her wheelchair was like really, really cool, and like could hold her computer and could go really fast and had like built-in guns and stuff like that. It was just like the coolest wheelchair I've ever thought of.
Yeah.
And I was like, I went to like a car mechanic and I was like, can you do this but in a wheelchair? They're like, what? Like, I'll pay you for it. They're like, okay, sure.
Nice.
And it was just such a fun character to play.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't let the lower strength score stop me from still having fun. And it didn't ruin the game for me at all. So that's why I'm
No,
like,
and
what's the big deal?
that's the beauty of these games is you you can think of solutions to situations like that
Mm-hmm.
that end up taking something that might be seen as a problem and turning into a strength for that character or a hook, something that becomes kind of their thing, which is yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah, I really like that character. We only played a couple of games with her, but my favorite thing that she had was a scorpion tail shotgun. It
Mm,
just like popped over her wheelchair.
sure. Yeah, that's cool.
So, on that note, where can people find your books and you?
So my all my stuff is on DM's Guild. My author name is Joel Klein. If you're to look up Raconteur's Lexicon, you'll see them. Plus, you'll see a few other things that I've published, and I've got a few more things in the works as well that I hope to
Very cool.
keep working on over the next few months. And then you can also find me Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Midlife Dices, working on getting a couple streaming groups together. So building a Twitch group, etc.
Awesome.
I'm the epitome of a midlife. I'm almost 47, and so the name really came up by personal experience. I've often said I've been in midlife crisis for about 10 years, so that should be expanding my lifetime. So that's good.
I think I've been in my quarter life crisis for at least the last 9.
There you go. You've just added 36 years to your life then.
But
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, Midlife Dice is on anywhere, hopefully. I think I've found all the various claimed all the various social media names for them.
Did you do TikTok?
I don't. Yeah, that might be
the one.
Yeah, that would maybe not be on brand.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't have a TikTok. I don't know how it works, so
I've seen videos and I don't see the appeal, but for other people, it's great.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of videos that were like D&D related that I'm like, oh, that's fun. Like that was cute. I like that. But
Okay.
like I would just want to watch that and then not watch anything else again.
Sure.
Just be like, nope, that's all I got. That's all I want to watch.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you again for joining. This was a lot of fun. It was wonderful chatting with you and looking through the books that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem. So everybody, please go give some love and check out all of the links down below and go purchase all the PDFs for your own use. You can also find us on Twitter at Beholder to No One. You can also look on Facebook, but we won't be there because I won't answer you. And if you go to our new website that my husband built, beholdertonone.com, it is super fancy, so please go check that out. And if you want to check out more things from us, we have discussions every Monday, and every Thursday we alternate between Beholder 2 one-shots and Behold Clearlight, where we play tabletop one-shot games or a horror-esque 5th edition game. Also, keep an eye out for some future stuff that we will be announcing soon. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye!
Bye!